This is your reality check.
Hey everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is the show for September 11th. I am Cristina Roach. I'll be your host today. Darren is still away. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, Cuboids?
Producer Pat.
Hey, checkers.
And not as usual, although you'll recognize the voice, Elan Dubrofsky.
Hello.
And also Dina Xirlin.
Hi.
We have three interesting segments for you guys today. Adam's going to be talking about why hot dog buns and hot dogs are sold in different numbers. And then Dina is going to take us through the Ontario sex ed curriculum. And then Elan's going to bring us a segment about crazy 80s, 90s sitcom connections. But first, I'd like to bring you guys a little update on GOOP. Now, as regular listeners know, I've done a few segments on Gwyneth Paltrow's lifestyle blog GOOP, which peddles pseudoscience under the guise of wellness. In truth, I could do a segment every week on GOOP. But on episode 467, I told you guys about a nonprofit called Truth in Advertising, or TINA for short, who conducted an investigation into Paltrow's site and filed a complaint with two California district attorneys claiming that the public platform is making inappropriate health claims and using deceptive marketing tactics. Now, shortly after this went down, Paltrow did an interview with Hollywood Reporter about her GOOP expansion plans and in reference to this criticism. She said, quote, "I'm interested in criticism based on fact, not on projections. If you want to F with me, bring your A game." Well, GP, it has already been brought in.
Nice.
Last week, California regulators reached a settlement with GOOP regarding their use of unsubstantiated health claims to market products, specifically $66 jade and rose quartz eggs, which GOOP claims you insert into the vagina to increase chi, orgasms, vaginal muscle tone, hormonal balance, feminine energy, and some BS called Inner Judge Flower Essence Blend, which they claimed could treat depression.
What the?
Now, as part of the conditions of the settlement, GOOP was not only ordered to refund customers who bought any of those products in 2017, they also have to pay $145,000 in civil penalties. But it gets better. The best part of the stipulated final judgment, like let's face it, $145,000 is probably a drop in the hat for Paltrow. But GOOP must stop from engaging in deceptive marketing and are bound by a civil judgment for the next 5 years that precludes GOOP from, quote, making and or disseminating any claim or representation about the nature, attributes, effects, efficacy, benefits, results, or safety of any nutritional supplement or medical advice unless at the time of making and or disseminating such claim or representation it is true, not misleading, and defendant already has in its possession and relies upon competent and reliable scientific evidence concerning the nutritional supplement or medical device for which the claim or representation is being made and or disseminated that substantiates such claim or representation.
I don't even get it. Like, that was the judgment just against GOOP. Shouldn't that be the law against, like, all products always? Like, everyone else is allowed to have unsubstantiated claims about their health products?
No, you make a good point. Now, says Bonnie Patton, the executive director of TINA.org, for far too long, Paltrow and GOOP have been taking advantage of susceptible consumers by using deceptive and misleading health claims to sell their wares and turn a profit. This settlement makes clear that no health and wellness company is above the law, and that GOOP's past illegal marketing tactics will no longer be tolerated. Now, before this went down, Pat had already been talking to the fine people at Truth in Advertising about coming on The Reality Check, so stay tuned for that in the coming weeks. So on that awesome note, Adam, please enlighten us. Why are hot dogs and hot dog buns sold in different numbers?
Well, I will attempt to answer this question. A few weeks ago, I was charged with making lunch for my family. This included 2 adults, 2 older children, and my baby. I picked up a pack of hot dogs and hot dog buns out of the freezer, cooked them up on the barbecue, and was confident that these 12 hot dogs would feed us all. After eating just 2 hot dogs and noticing that there were none left, I wondered who had pigged out. Who ate all those hot dogs? I surveyed the room, and it looked like no one had eaten more than 2. How, I wondered, was this possible? A bun had fallen on the ground, and yet it and one other bun were still on the table, but all of the sausages were gone. Something didn't add up, and that something has been the bane of hot dog consumers since the first snouts and anuses were ground up to make this delicious food. The hot dog package, as it would turn out, contained only 10 hot dogs, but there were 12 buns. A variant of this problem has some buns being packed in sets of 8. Rarely, however, are the number of dogs and buns the same, meaning one cannot possibly buy a matching pack of hot dogs and hot dog buns. They will inevitably end up with a few extra buns or wieners. It sounds like a conspiracy. So what's going on? And the simple answer, which many have jumped to, is that this is a conspiracy by the hot dog industry to get us to either one of two options: buy hot dogs or buns we do not need by having an uneven number, for example, buying 8 buns and 10 wieners and simply not eating 2 of them, or buying large numbers of both in order to have an equal number of buns and wieners. In the 8 bun and 10 wiener scenario, the least common multiple is 40. That is the number that is divided by both the number of buns per pack and wieners per pack to give an integer, a whole number. You would need to get 5 packs of buns and 4 packs of sausages to have a 1-to-1 ratio without any waste. This is far more than I would have needed for my summer lunch with my modestly sized family, which continues to grow. In the 12 buns and 10 wiener scenario, the least common multiple is 60, requiring 5 packs of buns and 6 packs of wieners. But a conspiracy is not necessary to explain the situation. In fact, the more likely explanation is that historically, meat packers and bakers didn't really care what the other was doing. They each did their own thing, and when those things didn't line up, neither went out of their way to fit the other's needs, and they didn't really care, and the consumers were just kind of caught in the crossfire. So what are the independent reasons which might have led to the different numbers of hot dogs and hot dog buns? Cecil at The Straight Dope gave some plausible reasons for this in a 1987 article on the subject. Now, he doesn't have any conclusive reasons to come to this, but he's just kind of like brainstorming about possible reasons, and to me it made a lot of sense, so I thought I'd share that. Now, meat packers, for the most part, like to pack things by the pound. A standard-sized hot dog sausage is packed 10 to the pound. That's just a size that worked well with hot dogs. That's easy enough to account for your inventory if every pack is 1 pound. And sometimes a jumbo-sized hot dog can be found in a package which is 8 to the pound. So the weight of the actual package is the same, but depending on the size of the actual sausage, that's what changes the number that's in the pack. So it's not like they're making a bunch of sausages and then just saying, okay, we're going to put this together. It happens to be like 1.3 pounds. And it's just harder to sell and everything's complicated. So makes the math easier. Everyone's happy. Now, on the flip side of this, bakers don't seem to like things being in groups of 10. You very rarely find baked goods in sets of 10. You may have heard the term baker's dozen. 12 is a nice number for a baker, as it can be packed well in rows of 3 rows of 4 or 2 rows of 6. 4 rows of 3, which is a little like 3 rows of 4. But basically, depending on how they're laid out, depending on the shape and things like that, there's a lot of configurations that work well with a number like 12. Similarly, 8 packs fairly well in either a bag or a tray, or it might fit, well on your baking sheet. 2 rows of 4 or 4 rows of 2, whatever you want. Hot dog buns are long and thin, so packing them as 8 works pretty well. So you kind of have 2 rows of 4. That looks okay. 10 doesn't work as nicely. You get 2 rows of 5, which is a bit more cumbersome. Might not work that well. It might not hold well on a baking sheet in the oven, and it might not hold together well in a bag. They might not stack as well and things like that. It might not pack as well. So it's certainly not impossible to make a 10-pack of buns, but what's the baker's motivation to do that? People will still buy an 8 or 12 pack even if they don't match perfectly to the sausage count, as we see by the fact that people continue to make sausages at home. People continue to make hot dogs at home. Still a booming business. It's hard to say for sure why the bakers avoid 10, but the fact that most other products, from rolls to donuts to croissants to cupcakes, are almost never sold in 10 packs, but often in 6, 8, or 12 packs, shows that 10 is just not a size commonly used for bakers. While I would love to assume some conspiracy is at play, and that I could blame some evil, greedy sausage mogul for my failed lunch, which had me looking for a bag of chips to fill the void in my stomach afterwards, it seems that a much more mundane explanation suffices. Just people don't really care. And while people like me and Steve Martin's character in the film Father of the Bride may be incensed by this, it doesn't seem like most consumers are willing to do or say much about it. Oscar Mayer claims in the 1987 article that Cecil wrote for The Straight Dope that of the 50,000 or so letters, and this was back in the day of actual written letters, that they get each year, only about 10 to 15 are people that are annoyed at the hot dog to bun mismatch problem. Maybe they're just not voicing their anger at the hot dog person, but the bun person. Who knows? At the end of the day, having too many hot dog buns is a small problem compared to other more expensive mismatches in my life, such as my old house and car, which didn't have room for my growing family. I have no one to blame for those problems but myself.
Speaking of buns and wieners, Dina, can you tell us about the sex ed curriculum?
I would love to, Cristina, and thanks so much again for having me, Checkers. So, the Ontario Sex Ed curriculum is back on the news cycle, and shout out to Darren who covered the then new curriculum on episode 350. So, in July, soon after Ontario's Premier Doug Ford was sworn into office, he announced that he is scrapping the 2015 updated sex education curriculum and replacing it with an updated version of the 1998 curriculum for elementary schools. And just for reference, same-sex marriage wasn't even legal then. High schools, luckily, will continue to use the 2015 version, by the way. So what I'd like to do is go over some of the differences between what I'm going to refer to as the interim curriculum and the 2015 version. In the new interim curriculum, there is no mention of genitalia names, whereas in the 2015 version, they actually teach it in grade 1. There is no reference to breast development, which was previously taught in grade 4, although there is mention of chicken breast as a healthy food choice.
As part of sex education?
I mean, sex ed covers a variety of topics, including healthy nutrition and physical activity, and mentions that all genders and sexual orientations should feel included in health-related activities and discussions, and that using homophobic remarks is wrong. So that's a good start. But it doesn't mention gender as a social construct and the gender roles that follow from it. So it doesn't explore what does it mean to be a girl versus a boy versus somewhere along the spectrum. It doesn't mention any specific gender identities, including trans or two-spirit. The closest it gets is listing the term transgendered, ED at the end, in the glossary under homophobia, which is problematic for a number of reasons.
Wow.
For one, just like you don't refer to someone as femaled or Jewished. And second, transphobia is its own concept. Being trans is very different from being homosexual. And in fact, homosexual is even now kind of an outdated term. You just refer to gay and lesbian individuals. And so the fact that that's the only place where there's even any explicit mention of the trans identity is pretty stigmatizing, in my opinion, anyway. So in contrast, in the 2015 curriculum, in grade 6, kids will learn about concepts of queerness and different family types, as well as the harmful effects of stereotypes. And in grade 8, they learn about the different gender identities. Another difference between the two curricula are that in grade 7-8, kids, according to this interim curriculum, will learn that abstinence is a positive choice for adolescents. And they also learn about the possible consequences of quote-unquote risky behaviors. They don't even say risky sexual behaviors, just risky behaviors. And you're left to imagine what they may be.
Oh, so they don't even explain what that is?
Not really. You're just, a lot of it is kind of like filling the gaps with, whatever information you're able to find elsewhere is what it feels like to me. Because, for example, in the 2015 curriculum, students learn that abstinence can mean different things for different people. So, for example, in grade 7, and then in grade 8, they identify and explain what factors can affect decision-making regarding sexual activity, like peer pressure, desire, pregnancy risk, and stuff like that. So they recognize abstinence as, a choice, and they explore what that choice might mean to different people, and should abstinence only not work for everyone as a solution, then what are some things that you can do to decide whether you should remain abstinent or whether you want to pursue certain activities.
If it talks about those pressures, and then you're having the children be aware of what's around, rather than just kind of putting their head in the sand, which ultimately is probably going to help them make the right decision, and would probably lead to more abstinence rather than just what misunderstanding would. It seems self-defeating as a concept to just say like, yeah, just use abstinence and it's fine. But I don't even know what I'm up against.
There is good evidence to show that abstinence only as a method of imparting kind of sex ed is not useful and not helpful compared to, exploring the different options and, making kids more informed about their choices. Because if you're just going to tell kids, don't do it, they're still going to do it, and they may choose behaviors that are riskier than others. So might as well be informed.
They're not useful and not helpful. You mean in terms of like decreasing like unwanted results, like, I don't know, like STIs or unwanted pregnancies, things like that?
Exactly. Bingo. Yeah. So there's scientific research to prove that. So it's unfortunate that evidence doesn't seem to inform this old curriculum. So speaking of STIs, Elan, and thank you very much for using the correct term, because the interim curriculum uses the outdated term sexually transmitted diseases, STDs, and not sexually transmitted infections, STIs. The issue with the term disease is that it means that you have symptoms of a certain ailment, whereas many infections do not necessarily have symptoms, like herpes or chlamydia. And also, the term disease may be perceived as more negative than the term infection, so it may discourage people from actually seeking help.
Right.
Finally, another thing I wanted to mention, like there's a few other issues, but I just selected kind of the ones that to me felt the most important. So here's really, to me, the issue that is most concerning to me. In the interim curriculum, there is no mention of consent. Okay, just like the term, the idea, the notion. And compare this with the approach from the 2015 curriculum, where they covered the meaning of general consent in grade 6. They discussed clear communication with romantic partners in grade 7. And in grade 8, they talk about consent during sex and how agreeing to one sexual behavior may not mean that you agree to all sexual behaviors or activities, I should say.
What is the motivation for them to go back to the old version? Like, what's sort of the underlying thing that they're trying to avoid? Just having people talk about sex?
Well, from a political standpoint, it was part of the platform on which Ford was running, and he delivered on his promise.
Right. But like, why was that? I'm just trying to understand, like, what's the political leaning that makes you not want it? Like, I guess maybe I'm just like out to lunch here. I should know I'm being very naive, but I'm just curious to know, like, what's the reason why people want it different?
Well, I mean, it was in the news a lot, right? And I think it was a lot of it was a misinterpretation of what was actually in the curriculum. And there was an idea that the curriculum was trying to teach kids about 7,000 genders and tell your kids to be trans and all these things like that. And when you really tease it apart, that's not really what it was about. But I think there might have been fears like that got people to be, in the streets protesting the curriculum and saying, I'm going to pull my kids out of public school and stuff like that. I think he rode on a bit of a wave of that, right? I think some of what I read also mentioned that, like, there were things that people were concerned that were in there, and the only place they were mentioned was like, here's a note to teachers in case a student asks about it. And then that becomes interpreted as they're teaching kids about X, Y, Z.
The Elementary Teachers Union, which is known as EFTO, is legally challenging the province. So Sam Hammond, who is the president of the union, says, and I quote, EFTO believes that the actions of the government are in conflict with the Human Rights Code, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the professional obligations of teachers. And the civil liberties case will be heard on September 24th. And I'm very interested to hear what the outcome is.
Thanks so much, Dina. It's great to get an actual real overview about the differences between the two curriculums, and hopefully that people can listen and make their own decisions about it. Speaking of things that should perhaps stay in the 90s, Elan, tell us about crazy 80s, 90s sitcom connections.
Yeah, like I didn't want to put too much information into the document because this blew my mind. So I'm curious to see if you guys will feel the same way, or you'll either A, be like, oh, I already knew that, or B, like, I don't even care. But this is what I came up with for this segment, so hopefully you'll bear with me. So there's this really ridiculous podcast that I've been listening to lately called Rob and Akiva Need a Podcast. And it's hosted by one of my podcasting heroes, like aside from the TRC folks, of course. But this guy, Rob Cesternino, former Survivor competitor, and also his friend Akiva Winokur. And the premise of the show is that people send in ideas of things they should podcast about, and they add it to a wheel, and then at the end of every episode, they spin the wheel to determine what the next episode will be about. So I was going to listen regardless, just because I love Rob C., but I was especially intrigued when the first episode came out with the topic being a recap of Season 3, Episode 7 of the 80s sitcom Perfect Strangers. So, quick sidetrack. Pat and Cristina and Adam, like, have you guys ever heard of this show, Perfect Strangers? Did you ever watch this?
Yeah, so Cousin Balky, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. I watched it back in the day.
Yeah, I watched it regularly.
The reason why Elan is not asking me, by the way, is that he makes me listen to all the podcasts he listens to, so...
Yeah, Dina's totally spoiled
so
on
she
this.
already knows.
So yeah, Perfect Strangers is a show about two distant cousins who live together. There's Larry, the straight man, and his eccentric cousin Balky from the fictional Mediterranean island of Mypos. And Balky's new to America. He misunderstands everything. He gets all the sayings wrong. He gets him and Larry into all kinds of zany adventures. Lots of fun. By the way, fun coincidence, this episode that was covered on Rob and Akiva Need a Podcast, Season 3, Episode 7, was about a psychic. Apparently, a psychic visits the Chronicle, the newspaper where Larry and Balky work, and has a premonition that Larry's going to die at midnight that night. And obviously, hilarity ensues as they try to avoid that. Mm-hmm. So, okay. Rob and Akiva are talking about the silly episode of Perfect Strangers, having a good time. I'm listening. I'm having a good time. Then they dropped a nugget of pop culture knowledge that blew my frickin' mind. Like, okay, quick warning. If you're listening to this podcast while jogging or handling heavy machinery, I'd suggest you take a break and you sit down for this one, okay? So apparently at the start of the episode, Larry is talking with the elevator operator at the Chronicle, and it's the actress who plays Harriet Winslow on Family Matters. But actually, wait, it's not just the actress who plays Harriet Winslow on Family Matters. It's Harriet Winslow. That's the name of the character. Apparently, Harriet Winslow was a minor character in Perfect Strangers. She was introduced at the start of Season 3, and her husband, Carl Winslow, played by Reginald VelJohnson, he's introduced in the 4th season episode Crime Busters, in which the couple moves into Larry and Balky's apartment building. The Winslows are on Perfect Strangers. Did you guys know this?
I have no idea what the you're talking about.
Do you know the show Family Matters?
No.
What?
Yeah, no, I never. Family Matters is not my. I never watched that show.
But do you know it existed?
Yes, I know it existed. Yeah.
Family Matters was a spin-off of Perfect Strangers. I didn't know this.
Like, that I didn't know. I mean, I know them. I didn't watch the show, but I know about the show in general. So it was an actual spin-off.
Like, Harriet Winslow was a character in Perfect Strangers, and I guess the people who were making the show thought, this is such an interesting character. Yeah. Let's make a show about her and her life, and we'll go see what's going on with the elevator operator. And
except then never mention her again.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Okay, so I don't know what's crazier. The fact that the Winslows were initially on Perfect Strangers, or the fact that Family Matters was initially supposed to be a show about Harriet Winslow. Like, it was her character that triggered the spin-off. She's the Frasier. She's the Saul Goodman. As Akiva expressed perfectly in this Rob and Akiva Needs a Podcast episode, Harriet Winslow is the least important character on Family Matters by a factor of 10 trillion. And of course, you guys know who is the most important character on Family Matters.
Steve Urkel.
Okay, so yeah, Steve Urkel, I always thought was the whole point of Family Matters. It's about Steve Urkel and his adventures with the Winslow family. But, like, he wasn't even on the show at the start. Initially, the show was just about the Winslow family living in Chicago, doing their thing. Here's the synopsis for episode 1 of Family Matters from IMDb. In the pilot episode, viewers meet the rest of Chicago Chronicle elevator operator Harriet Winslow's family. The first plot centers around her husband, Carl, a police sergeant with the Chicago Police Department. He's uptight when he learns that his mother, Estelle, aka Mother Winslow, is moving in, especially since his position as the family's head kahuna is threatened. Then, in episode 2, Harriet loses her job as the elevator operator at the Chicago Chronicle due to automation, gets a new job. So I guess that's how they explain why Harriet no longer works at the Chronicle in Perfect Strangers season 5, which is, by the way, another strange thing. Like, since when do characters spin off from a show that is still going? Like, Perfect Strangers still went on until season 8, and in parallel, Family Matters was happening.
Oh, wow, that's weird.
Anyway, Steve Urkel only showed up as the Winslow's nerdy neighbor in season 1, episode 12. It's called Laura's First Date. Carl sets Laura up with Stephen Q. Urkel as her date for the school dance when she doesn't have the courage to ask her cute classmate Mark. And obviously Carl regrets this because then Steve Urkel never leaves his life. Obviously, Pat, you're looking at me like you have no idea who I'm talking about, but trust me, this is a very
I know who Steve Urkel is.
So, of course, the producers realized what they had in Jaleel White's Urkel character right away. He quickly became the main character on the show Family Matters. In fact, Urkel became so popular that they even got Jaleel White to pull in Eddie Murphy and play his female cousin Myrtle Urkel, and of course his alter ego Stefan Urkel. So, okay. Okay, so 2 more fun facts to end this madness. Like I said, Steve Urkel only debuted on Family Matters Season 1, Episode 12, but when the show went into syndication, new Urkel-focused cold openings were written and shot for several episodes, starting with Season 1, Episode 4, and including Episode 7, 8, and 10. So, like, it went into syndication, and the network was probably like, I don't want to buy this garbage and show these episodes of Family Matters that don't have Steve Urkel on them. At least throw him in the cold open or something. Okay, and here's my favorite part of all. The actor who played Harriet Winslow, Jo Marie Payton, the one who the whole show is based upon, she actually left the show midway through season 9, the final season. She was replaced by Judy Ann Edler for the final 11 episodes. So, okay, the character that triggered the spinoff, that created Family Matters, ended up being so unimportant that they didn't even bother to come up with some plot line to explain why she's not around anymore. They just replaced her and, like, hoped no one would notice because it's Harriet Winslow. No one cares about her. Like, so crazy. The show was about her. And, like, she didn't even make it to the end.
Thanks, Elan. And thank you for listening. This week, I gave us a quick update on a recent settlement holding GOOP accountable for its wacky claims. Adam gave us a pretty simple take on the great hot dog versus hot dog bun packaging ratio conspiracy. Dina schooled us on the main differences between the 1998 and 2015 sex ed curricula and why it's important to understand the distinctions. And finally, we learned that Elan is pretty passionate about Family Matters. Until next week, stay classy, not smart-assy.
Peace out, cuboids.
Bye.
Be skeptical, not susceptible.
We'll talk to you next week, everyone.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Oh, thanks. It's not mine. I already talked about hot dogs. Remember that hard-hitting segment?
I mean, I feel like it's just a very closed-minded opinion, just assuming that you have to have a hot dog with a hot dog bun and vice versa. I think if you open yourself up to all the possibilities of these two products, then it won't bother you. Your life will actually be more enriched because of it.
Adam, do you happen to know if hamburgers and hamburger buns are sold at equal ratios? And if not, can you walk us through the math with that one?
Urkel became so popular that they even got Jaleel White to pull in Eddie Murphy and play his female cousin. sorry.
No one cares about me. None of you care about me.